este es un espacio que en realidad lo que hace es situar a la Universidad Autónoma de Madrid en el centro de la ciudad, en el corazón de la ciudad, en pleno rastro, un lugar que es multicultural y multilingüista y, por tanto, un lugar ideal para acoger un proyecto como el Comenius, donde países como Suecia, Dinamarca, Escocia, Portugal o España están aquí representados. Como es un espacio también que lo que quiere dejar es la palabra a otros, yo me voy a callar ya y voy a ceder enseguida la palabra a los que van a participar en este espacio de 2 o 3 días. Solo quiero decirles que espero que estén cómodos, que si necesitan algo, la infraestructura que tenemos está a su disposición, no es muy grande, pero sí que está a su disposición, y para lo que necesiten, aquí estamos y deseamos acogerles con afecto. Espero que esta retransmisión en directo, toda esta parafernalia técnica, sepa transmitir el afecto de verdad que de corazón les ofrecemos en esta casa. Muchas gracias. Ahora cedo ya la palabra a María Rodríguez Moneo.
Muchas gracias. Bueno, en nombre del Ministerio de Educación, Cultura y Deporte, quiero dar la bienvenida a todos los asistentes a este encuentro y especialmente a los miembros del proyecto Comenius Teacher Learning for European Literacy Education, que han celebrado en el día de hoy, en la mañana de hoy, el último encuentro de un periodo de 2 años de colaboración y de trabajo. Y les quiero agradecer especialmente el que hayan elegido Madrid para celebrar esta reunión y que hayan querido compartir con nosotros su conocimiento y sus experiencias. Estamos en la Corrala, que es como tradicionalmente se denomina en Madrid a las casas de vecinos. En este momento el mundo es pequeño y nuestros vecinos proceden, como se decía con anterioridad, de Escocia, Lisboa, Copenhague, Estocolmo, incluso Australia. Bienvenidos a todos. Quiero agradecer a todas las personas que han colaborado para que este encuentro sea posible. Al equipo del CENIE, por el trabajo que han llevado a cabo, que han trabajado muy duro durante muchos meses, al equipo de la Autónoma y muy especialmente a Rachel Whittaker, que se ha tomado muy en serio la encomienda europea de difusión del proyecto. Y sin su tesón y su esfuerzo ímprobo y su trabajo constante, no hubiera sido posible este encuentro y el compartir el conocimiento en torno al tema que nos ocupa. Quiero agradecer también en el día de hoy la presencia de María José Navas de la UNED y de Liliana Tolchinsky de la Universidad de Barcelona, que van a abrir con sus intervenciones este encuentro. Y quiero agradecer especialmente también la presencia de David Rose y Jean Martin, que son 2 personas de 2 referentes indiscutibles que han venido desde Australia, que es un país que, como todos ustedes saben, es un referente a su vez en los estudios sobre la gramática funcional. Todos los que estamos aquí sabemos de la importancia de la lectura y que la lectura es una herramienta fundamental para el aprendizaje. Por eso, encuentros como el de hoy, que nos unen en torno al tema de leer para aprender, son tan importantes para mejorar la educación de nuestros días y el proceso de aprendizaje, el éxito escolar de nuestros alumnos. Sabemos de la relación tan estrecha que existe entre los problemas y el retraso lector y los problemas en el aprendizaje, entre el retraso en lectura y el abandono escolar, y entre el retraso en lectura también y los problemas en empleabilidad. La comisaria europea, Vassiliou, se ha tomado muy en serio el tema de la lectura y ha hecho de la lectura y de la alfabetización un eje fundamental y un pilar esencial en la Unión Europea. No es casual, por eso, que uno de los compromisos de educación y formación para el 2020, ET 2020, sea reducir la tasa de alumnos que tienen problemas lectores de un 20% a un 15%. No es casual tampoco que en los 2 últimos años se haya publicado el primer estudio, el primer informe sobre la enseñanza de la lectura en Europa, que ha sido publicado por Eurídice, y nos permite tener un panorama de cómo está el proceso de lectura y el de la enseñanza de la lectura en todo el continente. Se ha creado también un grupo de expertos sobre literacy que han elaborado informes con recomendaciones para los distintos estados. Se ha abierto un sitio web donde se han dedicado y se han colgado una serie de programas en torno a la lectura en toda Europa. Y en los próximos días, esperamos que en los próximos días, se resolverá la convocatoria europea para la creación de una red europea de programas de literatura. Desde el Ministerio de Educación, Cultura y Deporte somos muy conscientes de la importancia de la lectura y nos parece que es clave para la mejora de la formación de los ciudadanos de nuestro país. Creemos que es necesario desarrollar actividades de formación y de apoyo a los profesores de otras materias que no sean nucleares o no tengan un ámbito nuclear en torno a la lectura, de otras áreas que necesitan acompañar a sus alumnos en procesos de comprensión de la retórica y el discurso propios de las distintas disciplinas. Así que los alumnos, en este proceso de aprendizaje de la lectura que se produce a lo largo de toda la vida, como todo el mundo sabe, tienen que ir incorporando. También nos parece fundamental incorporar nuevos hábitos lectores en las tareas escolares específicas, ¿no? La lectura y la escritura multimodal e hipertextual conviven en nuestros días con las formas tradicionales de lectura y por eso en la Unión Europea se habla de alfabetizaciones múltiples. Creemos que esto es importante, crear, como decía, nuevos hábitos de lectura. En las sesiones de este encuentro se analizarán distintos ámbitos, distintas materias que todos ustedes conocen y que están en el programa, pero sí me gustaría destacar que en la jornada de mañana, se presentarán algunos materiales y acciones de formación que se realizan desde el Ministerio y que se pueden encontrar en el portal www.leer.es, que seguro que todos ustedes conocen. Para finalizar, me gustaría subrayar la importancia del trabajo en colaboración. Colaboración entre países, entre niveles educativos, entre disciplinas, entre lenguas, entre instituciones. Colaboración que es fundamental y que es esencial para mejorar el aprendizaje de la lectura. Y también la importancia de la colaboración para compartir prácticas dirigidas a mejorar la enseñanza y el aprendizaje de la lectura y, en último término, de la alfabetización múltiple. Como directora del Centro Nacional de Innovación e Investigación Educativa, creo que este tipo de encuentros son realmente importantes y fundamentales para mejorar la educación de nuestros días. Muchas gracias.
A continuación, tiene la palabra la vicerrectora de Relaciones Internacionales, Amaia Mendicoechea.
Thank you. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor of the University,
en nombre del rector de la Universidad Autónoma de Madrid, don José María Sanz, me gustaría darle la bienvenida a todos.
Of the Comenius Project, Teacher Learning for European Literacy Education, literacy across the curriculum in different languages and contexts, functional approaches to reading and writing. I'd like to thank particularly all those of you who've come from different countries, or even different continents, and particularly our keynote speakers, Maria José Navas from UNED, Liliana Tolczynski from Barcelona, Jim Martin and David Rhodes from the University of Sydney. It is certainly a pleasure to be here to open this conference on behalf of the Vice Chancellor, and I want to thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity, and especially Rachel Whitaker, my colleague for many years now in the English department at the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid. Our university is a partner in this project, together with Strathclyde University in the United Kingdom, the National Centre for Reading in Denmark, the University of Sydney in Australia, and the Institute of Theoretical and Computational Linguistics in Portugal, all of them coordinated by Stockholm Education Administration in Sweden. We participate in another project called Responding to Diversity by Engaging with Students' Voices, a Strategy for Teacher Development, and this shows that there is a real interest in our university in this type of collaboration. As you know, the objective of the Comenius projects is to strengthen and support the European dimension of nursery, primary and secondary education, promoting mobility and cooperation among teaching institutions. There is no doubt that the present project fits within the objectives of this Comenius program by bringing together experts on literacy from a number of different European and non-European countries, and with very different traditions, obviously, in the teaching of literacy skills, with a theoretical background and also with a practical orientation. A common criticism on research on pedagogy is the fact that ideas don't filter all the way down to the classroom. And this is why I particularly like what you're doing here by participating in this conference and by collaborating in this project. Teacher training is an important component of the project. Working with teachers in the classroom to improve literacy skills is crucial and central to the objectives of this project. You may know that the latest PISA results for reading competence show that Spain is last but one among the OECD countries, a position that it shares with countries like France and Italy. I'm sure you may know why this is the case. I have no idea. But it's true that in this era in which the amount of information that we receive from so many different sources is so overwhelming, it is crucial to understand why our results are so poor in reading comprehension and what we can do to improve them. Bringing together experts from different countries and different traditions will surely contribute towards this goal. Sharing good practices, which is also part of what you do in the Comenius projects, is also something that really benefits everybody. I like the fact that in the program there are special sessions for classroom research and classroom experiences, without which it would be impossible to understand what's going on, and it would be impossible to implement new practices to improve things. Your work is therefore absolutely essential, absolutely necessary, and we're proud to hold this conference at the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid. Working together with European and international partners in projects of this type, it's certainly at the top of the international agenda of our university. And I want to express my support and enthusiasm for this project and other similar projects that we have, and encourage you to carry on working in this direction. I suppose I have to say that I declare this conference open, and I hope you have fun and learn a lot in the next few days. Thank you.
Por último, tiene la palabra la profesora Rachel Whitaker, que es un poco el alma en este momento de esta reunión.
Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Carmen, and thank you to Maria and to Amaya for being here, for making this project clearly important to the university and to the Ministry of Education. So we're really very grateful that you've found some time in your very busy lives to come here for this afternoon. So thank you very much. And thank everybody too for being here. I too would like to welcome you to this conference. It's a conference with a very long name, and the name is long because the conference is trying to cover a number of different objectives and a number of different audiences. So we have the name of the conference, Dissemination Conference for the Comenius Project, Teacher Learning for European Literacy Education. We have our English name, Literacy Across the Curriculum in Different Languages and Contexts, functional approaches to reading and writing. And we have our Spanish name, aprendizaje integrado de las lenguas y los contenidos, aproximación funcional a la lectura y a la escritura. So we have a Comenius group, and we have inside the Comenius group people who belong to both these titles, and also we have invited and a number of different people who have come along to tell us too about what they do in reading and writing, and we want to share with them what we are doing too in reading and writing in this project. As has already been said, this is key to education. We're in the 21st century. Educational failure, educational dropouts is still a huge problem. It's going to go on unless we do something about it. The people who joined this project, who were invited to join this project 3 years ago now, because our first attempt wasn't successful, but we learned this is a Comenius multilateral lifelong learning project. And we are multilateral, and we are learning throughout our lives, and we picked ourselves up, got together and made a new bid, and our new bid got it, and here we are. We've been working for 2 years, and we would like to share with you, and as I say, exchange. We have, as Carmen said, we have the Corrala, we have an open space in which to talk, exchange. So we hope that this will be really an opportunity to make links, to exchange ideas, to make personal links, so that more projects will come out. This project will carry on. So during this is a day and a half, really, we want to tell you what we've been doing and hear what you do and what you think about it, so that it will be a two-way and a multilateral exchange, a multilingual exchange. So this is our context, this is what we'd like to do. So I'd like to thank, because we are here because the Universidad Autónoma has allowed us to use these premises. We are here with great support from the National Centre for Research and Innovation, for Educational Research and Innovation. We are here because the literacy project inside the centre listened to us, decided that what we were doing was interesting, and has worked very enthusiastically. They haven't stopped. Carmen and Araceli, who are here, and another member who unfortunately, possibly because she had been working so hard, fell down yesterday and is now in hospital. And we know how these stress things happen, and so people are overworked. So they have worked extremely hard. They have managed to get support, intellectual support and economic support. It's a very difficult moment. So the fact that we have had such support, we thank Maria very much, because I know she has done so much work to get this project and this conference so that it could be really a dissemination conference, as she said. So these are some of my thanks. Other thanks too are to different areas in the university. The research, Pro-Vice Chancellor of Research has given us funding. Pro-Vice Chancellor of Extension and Cooperation has funded us. The Faculty of Arts has funded us. And the other universities have supported us very strongly with their work. The Universidad Complutense de Madrid, the Universidad de Mondragón are part of our team, and many, many working hours have been invested here. So for all of this, many, many thanks. And I'll just tell you one or two practical things, and then we move on to something which is the main point. So let me see, the organization of the program, we've really tried to make the strands and the languages a little bit coherent so that it's easier for people to go to what they want to hear, move in and out. So we've done our best. So there are many different ways of doing things. We hope you'll be patient, and you will see that we have tried to make it as easy as possible for everybody to hear and see what they want to hear. We know that Spanish and English are among the most widely spoken languages in the world, but it's not necessary that the two have to know the other language, so we have got translation from now on for all the members who want it, because it'll mainly be now from English into Spanish. We asked our 2 plenaries of today, and thank you very much, they said yes, they would speak in English. So we'll be having lectures now by Spaniards in English, and we all have a translation to Spanish for the people who need it. There's our helpers, and that's another thanks. We've got some hard-working helpers who are looking after all the abstract books, the names, the headphones, and so on. So the helpers, if you want headphones, the helpers will be there with those. And I think that is where we are. So this evening we thank very much for invitation to the ministry. So after we've finished and we want to go on talking, we can go on talking with a little drink of wine and some more tapas, because tapas are so easy to eat. So this is what you'll be getting, lots for all our visitors, plenty of tapas. And we'll have a little, as we are enjoying our chats and our drinks, a Spanish guitar will be playing in the background here in the patio, so we hope you will enjoy all this. So I think I will be quiet now and hand back to our hostess, Carmen Gallardo, the director of the Corrala. So thank you very much all for being here.
Nos levantamos y esperamos a la conferencia. Es luego, ¿no? Un poquito. Bueno, pues ya empezará la conferencia primero.
¿Qué hay? Buenas tardes a todas y a todos. Soy Carmen Campos del equipo responsable.
Everyone, my name is Carmen Campo. I'm in charge on the behalf of the Ministry of Education. Thanks very much for all those who have come from other autonomous regions. For us, it is an honor and a pleasure to receive all of you and to have cooperated to the extent possible to the organizing of this event. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce the first plenary session, which is going to be a session, a block, with two different presentations. First, on the part of María José Navas, Professor María José Navas. María José Navas will speak for a half an hour, then there will be a Q&A session, and then we will go on to the Liliana Tolczynski presentation, so that you can also have time to pose questions after the end of her presentation. María José Navas, as many of you know, is professor of the Department of Behavioral Science Methodologies. And she has also cooperated in other areas in a cooperation between the UNED and the the Universidad Autónoma de Madrid. She has an extensive resume, and I'm just going to skip most of it because you can have a look at it in the webpage of the conference. But I would like to point out that her recent publications on PISA are the basic competencies of today for the world of tomorrow, the Canary Islands PISA report 2009, and PISA and the assessment triangle written in 2011 together with Urdaneta in Psychotema. And I cannot come up with a better way to introduce her. The Vice Chancellor has mentioned that PISA and PIAC also are a very controversial topic from a political perspective, and all those who are who work in education don't like seeing how it is only spoken about from a journalist perspective or from a political perspective. And I can think of a better person to give us an overview from the point of view of the university environment and the environment of her area of knowledge of the PISA development throughout the last few years than the speakers today. So, thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation, for this introduction. Thank you very much for having invited me, and thank you very much for having invited me. And I think that there is a slight problem with the streaming because we are recording the event. So can you tell me when you have fixed it?
Bien, mientras empezamos, si no empezamos.
While we start and we don't start, I would like to take advantage of the opportunity that I have prepared as a brief document. So also, okay, we can start. I have prepared as a brief document which more or less supports the topics that I'm going to deal with here, and which I cannot delve into because of shortage of time. And so I'm going to change to English to.
We live in a globalized world, and the crisis has brought a time of intensified global competition with higher and changing demands. People no longer compete for jobs in their own countries, but also in the countries that are still able to create jobs, and in the countries that have always been interested in attracting talented people. Schools need to prepare students to deal with more rapid change than ever before, to use technologies that haven't been yet invented, and for jobs that haven't been created. Just a few decades ago, nobody knew about communication and information technologies, but nowadays, a great deal of the jobs in the marketplace require a good command of those skills. So in a global economy, the yardstick for success is no longer improvement by national standards alone. The the OECD has taken up that challenge by developing PISA that represents a commitment by governments to monitor the outcomes of education systems regularly and in an internationally agreed framework. Ángel Gurría, the Secretary General of the OECD, says that the world is indifferent to tradition and past reputations, unforgiving of frailty and complacency, and ignorant of custom or practice. Success will go to those individuals and countries that are swift to adapt, slow to complain, and open to change. The task of governments will be to ensure that countries rise to this challenge, and the OECD will continue to support their efforts. PISA assesses to what extent students, 15-year-old students, know the knowledge and the skills that are essential for full participation in society, with a focus on reading, math, and science. Every 3 years, PISA looks in depth at a major domain and provides just a summary profile of the knowledge and skills in the other 2 domains. The focus of the first assessment in the year 2000 was reading, somehow acknowledging the importance of this crucial competency. 3 years after, the focus was math, then science, and then in 2009, back again to reading. Actually, reading is the only domain we have had data within a decade so far. In the year 2009, 500,000 of students completed the assessment. They came from 65 countries that represent 90% of the world economy and 26 million of students. The gray color shows the OECD countries, and the blue color shows the non-OECD countries or partner countries. Usually, between 3,500 and 6,500 students are typically tested in each country. PISA works with an innovative concept of literacy. It focuses not on the mastering of a specific school curriculum, but on the students' ability to use their knowledge and skills to meet real-life challenges in situations in which that knowledge and skills may be relevant. So it includes a broad set of cognitive and metacognitive competencies. Among the first, we have basic decoding, knowledge of words, grammar, textual and linguistic structures and features to knowledge about the world. Among the second, the awareness of and the ability to use a variety of strategies, of appropriate strategies to process texts. On the screen, you can check the definition of reading literacy in PISA, and in the document provided, you can find the 2009 PISA framework that is built on 3 characteristics. The range of reading situations in which people read, the different texts, the different ways that written texts are presented, mainly continuous texts and non-continuous texts. I mean, ads, charts, graphs, figures, etc. And the way or the variety of ways readers approach and use texts, from the functional and finite, such as finding a piece of practical information, to the deep and far-reaching, such as understanding other ways of doing, being, and thinking. These kinds of reading literacy skills, the research shows that are more reliable predictors of the economic and social well-being than the number of years spent in school or in post-formal education. When reading is the focus of the assessment, results are reported on a general scale, but also on 5 subscales. 2 text format subscales, and 3 aspect subscales: access and retrieve, integrate and interpret, and reflect and evaluate. Both the general scale and the subscales are defined so as to have a mean of 500 and a standard deviation of 100. 500 is the average of the reading literacy of the students in the OECD countries that took part in the study in the first assessment in the year 2000. And 100 is the standard deviation of those scores. Means, averages are very nice and convenient features, convenient statistics, because they allow us to describe the performance of a whole population of a country with just one number. And so it's very easy to compare countries. However, they are not so useful to describe the strong and weak points of the students of that population. So that's the reason why PISA divides that scale into levels of proficiency and describes the knowledge and skills that has to be completed, that a student needs in order to complete successfully each of the levels. In the document provided, you can find the description of all these levels of proficiency for the general scale and also for the subscales, both in Spanish and in English. And also you can find there the percentage of students attaining each level, both in the OECD area and also in the 6 countries involved in this Comenius project. One level of proficiency on the reading scale is equivalent to 72 score points of that scale, and that's considered to be the equivalent to 2 years of formal schooling. The results of the 2009 assessment reveal wide differences in reading literacy, both within the countries and across the countries. Finland and the countries and economies from Asia are on top of the ranking, not only on reading literacy, but also on math and science, with the stunning success of Shanghai on the very top in the 3 areas and quite far away from the second best in math literacy. The other side of the story is that 1 out of 5 students in the OECD area do not reach the baseline level. That is, the level at which students begin to demonstrate the knowledge and skills that will enable them to participate productively and effectively in society. Australia seems to be doing quite a good job because this rate is less than 15 instead of the OECD 20%. But in half of the partner countries, at least half of the students do not reach that baseline level. That level is level 2, by the way. If we now look to the other side, at the other side of the distribution, at the excellence zone defined by the 2 top levels, that is level 5 and level 6, we see that around 80% of the students in the OECD area demonstrate an excellent reading literacy, albeit in Spain, hardly 3% reach that level. And this area is critical to improve the workforce of a country and so to contribute to the economic and social progress. In all countries, the gender gap in reading literacy is really important. Girls outperform boys in every single country by an average in the OECD area of almost 40 points. That means that 1 out of 4 boys in the OECD area do not reach that baseline level, whereas 1 out of 8 girls do so. So there's a huge difference. You can see the gender gap of all the countries taken part in the 2009 study in the document provided and also the ranking of the countries. PISA has decidedly a policy orientation, aiming at highlighting differences in performance patterns with the purpose of identifying features common to the highly performing students, schools, and school systems, so as to be able to inform educational policy. How to do that? Certainly by measuring student learning outcomes, but also by measuring the student characteristics and the characteristics of their homes, schools, and the school system, and by relating those characteristics with the data on PISA tests. What are then the key factors that shape the good educational results? Well, most successful school systems seem to be comprehensive, inclusive, both socially and academically. The success of a school system seems to be related with the ability of teachers and schools to embrace diverse student populations through personalized approaches to learning. That is, the school systems of the countries with the best educational results share the following characteristics. They have low levels of vertical and horizontal differentiation. Students rarely repeat grades and aren't transferred out of schools because of behavioral problems, low academic achievement, or special learning needs. And students are not grouped in classroom according to their competencies. Most successful school systems grant greater autonomy to individual schools to design curricula and to establish assessment policies. And those systems do not necessarily allow schools to compete for student enrollment. And certainly, there is a high social and public recognition of the profession, of the teaching profession. And they usually tend to prioritize teachers' pay over, for instance, smaller classes. An important drawback of PISA that PISA shares with most of the international programs is that they have a limited value to inform the teacher work in classroom. I mean, those studies are useful to inform educational policy, but they are a lot less useful to inform teacher work. They are helpful tools for the assessment of learning, but not so helpful for the assessment for learning. Why? Because PISA and the other international programs are group scored assessments. I mean, the tests are designed and administered to assess groups of students, not to assess individual students. That means that no teacher can get to know the results of the PISA test of their students. The reason is that every student answers just a small set of questions. And the responses to that small set of questions do not allow us to estimate the competency of a single student in a reliable and valid way. They allow us to estimate the competency of groups of students, boys in Spain, girls in Sweden, but they don't allow us to estimate the competency of John Wilson in the UK or the competency of School X in Portugal. The OECD is perfectly aware of this drawback and recently launched a new study, a new PISA that is known as PISA for Schools. And this study is constructed to provide data at school level. It's designed to get information about what the students of a particular school know and can do. And interestingly enough, they report the results on the standard PISA scale. That means that the schools taking part in that study are going to be able to compare with the world's best school systems And for instance, we could know how far or how close the school our children attend is from a typical Finnish school or from a typical Korean school. But most importantly, schools that are going to take part in this study are going to get information sensitive to instruction, are going to get data that are useful to inform the teacher work. Because with PISA for schools, we get data at school level. So schools does get the results of their students, and so they can get to know their strong and weak points, and the teacher is going to be able to reorient their practice accordingly. As I told before, unlike PISA for schools, standard PISA has a clear policy orientation and focuses on countries comparison, and hardly on the gathering of helpful diagnostic information to link the assessment results to instruction, to the teacher work. But standard PISA can tell us something about it. Not much, because it's not its purpose, but it can tell us a bit to inform or to support the teaching learning process. First, teachers and schools can check to what extent they keep track with the knowledge and skills that experts deem essential for full participation in society. How? By checking the framework of the domains assessed, and by reviewing the PISA questions that OECD release every assessment. In the document provided, you can find, in the last page, you can find the link where you can check, where you can see the PISA questions released in every assessment, and also you have the link to check the reading framework. Second, PISA shows that some school resources are untapped, like the library. 9 out of 10 OECD schools have a library, but 2 out of 3 students go there less than once a month. Likewise, most of the OECD schools have computers with internet connection, and 87% of the OECD students report that working or playing with computers is really fun. However, 3 out of 4 of those students claim they spend no time in classroom using computers during language lessons. And this rate is even higher in math and science classes. Using the computers in classroom could help teachers could help teachers embrace the diversity in students' capacities and interests through individualized pathways to learning. All the more since 2 out of 3 students in the OECD report to lose track of time when working with computers. PISA also shows that non-cognitive aspects of learning have a deep impact in the learning results, especially the enjoyment of reading and the awareness of effective reading and learning strategies. In other countries, students who enjoy reading the most perform significantly better than students that enjoy reading the least. In the OECD area, there is a difference of more than 100 points between the top and bottom quarter of the students, of the distribution of the students according to how much they enjoy reading. That means that there is more than one level of proficiency and almost 3 years of schooling separating the performance of these top and bottom quarters of students. Let me give you some data about enjoyment of reading. In our current information and knowledge society, about 40% of the students in the OECD read only if they have to. And 45% read just to get the information they need. Almost 40% don't read for enjoyment, and this rate increased during the first decade of the century. And on top of that, 22% of the students in the OECD think that reading is just a waste of time. Let's move now to the reading and learning strategies. Concerning reading strategies, PISA asks students whether they know which strategies are most effective for summarizing information and for understanding and remembering texts. Concerning learning strategies, PISA gathers information about 3 kinds of strategies: control, elaboration, and memorization. In the handout provided, you can check these 3. Having effective learning strategies is becoming more and more an important educational outcome in and of itself. Schools actually need to focus on allowing students to manage and control their learning, not only to support their learning at school, but also to provide them with the tools needed to be able to manage learning later in life, as lifelong learning becomes instrumental and is absolutely necessary to improve the competitiveness of a country, as the results of the PIAC study have recently shown. What are the strategies? Which strategies show the strongest association with the reading literacy skills? Well, awareness of the effective strategies for summarizing information, also for understanding and remembering information, and the use of control strategies in learning. In the OECD, the quarter of students that are most aware of the effective strategies for summarizing information score an average of 107 points higher than the quarter of students that are least aware of these strategies. When it comes to the strategies for understanding and remembering information, that distance amounts to 90 points. And concerning the use of control strategies for learning, the difference between these 2 top and bottom quarters is 69 points. In summary, these are some of the tips that PISA provide us for informing the teacher work in classroom. First, it offers us the chance to check what is taught at school against what experts think are essential for full participation. Using the available resources at school, I mean library, computers, and taking advantage of the excellent attitude of the students towards computers could help build teachers' individualized approaches to learning. And in so doing, learning would increase, and the whole performance of the students would raise. Fostering the enjoyment of reading, especially among boys, because the gender gap is not only in reading literacy, but also in their interest and in enjoyment of reading. And certainly working on building effective reading and learning strategies. 9 years after the first assessment in the year 2000, the average of the reading literacy in the OECD is almost the same. Actually, it's slightly lower. The gender gap did not narrow in any of the participating countries that took part in the year 2000, and the percentage of students reporting to read for enjoyment dropped by 5 percentage points during the first decade of the century. But there is also some good news. Within less than a decade, Korea was able to double the share of students demonstrating excellence in reading literacy. A major overhaul in Poland's school system helped dramatically reduce the variability, the performance variability among schools, reduce the number of poorly performing students, and increase the overall performance by more than 20 points. There are other countries like Chile that show impressive gains starting from very low levels of performance. And Portugal did get also a very remarkable result, increasing the overall performance by almost 20 points. Recently, the PIAC study, a sort of PISA for adults study, have shown the importance of raising the level of proficiency in key information processing skills, in reading literacy, numeracy, and problem solving in technology-rich environments. 24 countries took part in that study, all but Portugal among the countries involved in this Comenius project, with a sample of more than 160,000 adults aged 16 to 65. You have the results in the handout, but the point I would like to share with you here is that in Spain, the average income of a person with reading skills on the two top levels is 60% higher than the average income of a person with reading skills in the two bottom levels. And those people are almost twice as likely as being unemployed. And there's more. The impact of these skills goes far beyond earnings and employment. In all countries, people with poor skills tend to trust less other people, are less involved in local communities, and tend to think that they have little impact on political processes. So somehow a poor mastery of those skills prevents people from fully participating in society. Finally, to stress out the great value of reading literacy, I would like to finish this talk with the beginning of the speech that Mario Vargas Llosa provided on occasion of the awarding of the Nobel Prize. The title is eloquent enough in praise of reading and fiction, and it goes like this. Aprendí a leer a los 5 años. Tengo que leerlo en español.
I learned to read at the age of 5 in Brother Justiniano's class at the De La Salle Academy in Cochabamba, Bolivia. It is the most important thing that has ever happened to me. Almost 70 years later, I remember clearly how the magic of translating the words in books into images enriched my life, breaking the barriers of time and space and allowing me to travel with Captain Nemo 20,000 leagues under the sea, fight with D'Artagnan, Athos, Porthos, and Aramis against the intrigues threatening the Queen in the days of the Secretary Richelieu, or stumble through the sewers of Paris, transforming to Jean Valjean, carrying Marius' inert body on my back. Reading changed dreams into life and life into dreams, and placed the universe of literature within reach of the boy I once was.
Muchísimas gracias, María José.
Thank you very much, María José. I think that we have time for one or two questions. Are there any questions for María José?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very interesting. All this data made interesting, made alive. Thank you very much. So, no, just a question about the gender difference still, and is it related to the models that mum is the one that reads to the children? I remember reading. It was in the newspaper, so there's a summary of a study. I think it was in Britain, which did show that. The children, boys consider that reading is female job and that's the end of it. Can you tell us anything about that?
Bueno,
I'm going to take advantage that we have simultaneous interpreting to answer in Spanish because I feel much more comfortable. I am not absolutely an expert in those topics, but of course it has a lot to do with the patterns of learning and of teaching and the socialization patterns and with the criteria that society works with nowadays. It is really impressive that there are countries where that gap has even increased. We are perfectly aware that we have that gap exists, that it is very, very important that there is that 1 out of every 4 boys doesn't even reach that level, whereas it's 1 out of 8 in the case of females. And so we really don't are not able to provide the resources necessary. I think that there are different models. Girls are more usually study more less technical or scientific careers, and boys do the opposite. And so it's really strange that we continue to do this way. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for your speech, Professor Navas. I belong to the National Institute of Educational Assessment, and we are very much involved with those studies, PIAC, PISA, and we are also getting into the PISA for schools. And my question was devoted. I'm also an orientator, and we have a very low percentage of excellence in Spain. And on the other hand, you have mentioned, and you were right, that we have to tend to not having big differences among students. And what teachings should we get out of this for educational policies? What recommendations could we give in order to get rid of those differences and at the same time we keeping good levels of excellence? I think that you are proposing something which is absolutely fundamental. Spain has done its homework in terms of equality. We have one of the educational systems which are most inclusive, both socially and also academically, from all the countries that take part, which are 65. And so we are doing quite well. We are very well positioned in terms of equality, but the quality has to be understood in the line that you were proposing. I would understand quality in terms of equality and excellence. We cannot ignore that other part of the distribution, which is the one that really can get us out of the hole in which we are right now. And so I think that we should have policies that, without letting go of the improvements in equality, work on the other side of the distribution. That's without any shadow of a doubt, that's where the differences are. If we compare the distribution of Spain, not the average, but if we compare the distribution of the different levels of competence, if we compare ourselves with the OECD, where we have the main difference is in levels 5 and 6. Up until level 4, we are more or less in line with the OECD. And so we have to do an effort in that respect, in that area, which is critical to improve our competitiveness. And taking advantage of the PISA for schools, I would also like to say that this is a very new project, and it has just started, and the countries that are now involved are the United States and ourselves and Spain. And so we are doing our homework. We do not have a continuous assessment system for our educational system, as many other countries have. But on the other hand, we are on the right way. We are on the right path of trying to define where we are at and work in studies that allow us to obtain and to get practical information on the spot for the information of the teachers' work. Of course, each study has an objective and a target, and PISA answers very well the objectives for which it was designed, but it is not able to answer other areas for which it was not created originally. Any other questions?
Muchas gracias por
Thank you very much for these minutes that we have spent trying to understand where we are located in terms of figures and projects. It was interesting for me that PISA for schools study. I don't know if I have understood that it is already underway as a project, that it is still to be developed, but I wanted to ask you if in that project will they contemplate, or will it be necessary to contemplate the reality of the students that can be nurturing to some extent a certain school before the results classify or place the school in a difficult position, mainly if that center is populated by people with a different reality, with a specific needs, with a specific problems. I don't know if I've made myself clear, but I'm not sure whether I have understood, but perhaps you could tell us a little bit. In principle, the idea is that there is very little information on this project. The idea that I have is that we are not going to receive data that are going to be disseminated. There is not going to be a ranking of the schools taking part. Those are going to be schools that want to get involved because they want to have that information for several reasons. For example, because one school wants to say, when it comes to publicize itself, we have the same level as whatever school in whatever country. But in principle, I don't think these are going to be results that are going to be published and that are going to give rise to a ranking of centers, of schools. That's right. We are just starting. We have just started. The information is available on the webpage of the National Institute of Educational Assessment. We have very little information so far, but we will get more information. We are preparing it, and the initial idea is not to create a ranking of schools to say I'm ahead of this or behind this other school, but just for every center to know where they are placed, where they are located. But the idea, when you carry out a study, you always can look at the studies or the results in comparison, but you can also take into account the socio-cultural index that you have as a starting point. And so this is a study that has just started, and I'm sure that in reports will be published, but for the time being we cannot tell you any more. Today we have been preparing leaflets to distribute among the schools. But the idea is to avoid those rankings which would not be beneficial for the schools. And if you go to an area where there are students that cannot read or write, of course we cannot compare them with other neighborhoods or other schools. Any other questions?
Thank you. Just taking advantage of what Maria Jose said about Portugal's change, I'd like to draw your attention to our interesting program tomorrow. And amongst the talks, there'll be a talk by one of the Portuguese team who was involved in the teacher training. So you'll see that tomorrow amongst all the other interesting talks. So I'd just like to take advantage. Thanks very much. Thank you so much.
Maybe the Portugal people would like to...
Would you like to say something? Portuguese team?
Portuguese team?
No.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about it tomorrow, but I was involved in the Portuguese PISA team for some years. I'm no longer there. And we had some ideas as being teacher for many years, and also a teacher trainer. I was convinced that somehow our classroom practices had a lot to do with the results we had in PISA and in other evaluation assessment studies. So we had a little project in the country using the released items, PISA released items for reading. We tested around 1,000 students, and then what we really wanted to know, so you don't have to come tomorrow. What we wanted to know was actually what was behind, how did the students feel about the gender, the texts, and about the tasks that PISA asked them to answer. And then we had a teacher training course all over the country, and it was quite wonderful. And yes, of course, it had a lot to do, I think, with the practices, the classroom practices.
Simplemente decir, y ya lo
I would like to just to say that it is true that the challenge is to involve the students in reading tasks which are relevant and interesting for them, so that they can incorporate, mainly the boys, so that they incorporate the reading into their daily activities. They now surf the web or they chat on the internet, and so we have to find out or to come up with a more useful strategy, more effective strategy.
Because everything is coming together. Tomorrow to Carmen Campos and her team will be talking about exactly this, reading to do, leer para hacer. And this also came out of the recent PISA results for adults, that what you do with reading in your profession is involved in the way your competences develop. So I think, you know, everything is all going together very nicely. So, sorry.
Well, but I'm not going to anticipate anything of what I'm going to talk about tomorrow, so you'll have to come to my speech. Yo creo que hay tiempo.
I think that we have time enough. I think that we can take a break of 5 minutes, and if we try to be on time in 5 minutes, we continue with Liliana. Okay? Thank you. Liliana Tolczynski is a professor of linguistics in the University of Barcelona and a researcher in the Institute of Educational Sciences. She is in charge of the doctor's PhD of the University of Linguistics of the University of Barcelona. And she is also in charge of projects for multilingual learning projects in that university. In 2003, she published several books, and in 2008, developmental and historical perspective of notational knowledge. On top of that, Liliana Tolczynski is a reference in Spain and outside of our country for all those who work with reading. She is going to talk about teaching practices, pedagogical practices, and classroom dynamics in early literacy teaching in Spain. Thank you very much, Liliana, for being here.
Because I have two objects on my hand, and I must talk in English with my friends and colleagues in Madrid, which is a very special kind of experience. Well, I hope I will remember what I put there a few days ago. So thank you very much for the organizing of this conference, for the pleasure and the challenge of being here. And now we are moving to the other extreme of the educational spectrum, because we are going to talk about early literacy. And mainly, I will try to share with you some insights we have got about what's going on inside the classrooms. You will agree with me that teachers are different. What we did is we turned this question into a research question. What are the differences between teachers? And before going on, this is obviously a shared endeavor. 3 different research projects that were supported by the Ministry of Education. Now it has a different name, but I cannot remember. And although the first project was devoted to early teaching of reading and writing, the second to reading comprehension and the text, and the third one to written composition, I will refer mainly to what we learned from the first project. So, what are the differences teachers display for literacy teaching? Why should we start so early? If we find problems so late, why should we start so early? It turns that in all, a child's success in learning to read in the first grade appears to be the best predictor of her or his ultimate success in schooling, as well as all of the events and outcomes that correlate with that. This assertion was made by Adams, well, a lot of time ago, but our research confirmed that this is the case. Certain initial differences are not overcome throughout school. We start very early, and the curious point about this issue is that most of the research that has been done on reading and writing has focused on the cognitive determinants of learning to read. If you look at any international journal, reading and writing, for instance, the percentage of work that have taken into account the teaching factors are really very, very small. It is now starting to change, but as a whole, people that have worked on reading acquisition have been very much concerned on what they call, or what we call, cognitive determinant, predictors of reading and writing, without taking seriously the teaching factor. They had very serious reason for that, because the teaching factors is one of the most complex things to evaluate. And yet, this is also an obvious thing. Literacy learning is a joint product of the learner and the environment. We can't attempt to account only for what are called subject-related variables. We must take into account contextual variables. The process of becoming literate is nurtured by multiple environments, and there are tons of works showing how important are earliest literacy experiences, family experiences, community practices, the role of reading and writing inside the community, the linguistic landscape, how present are reading or writing stimulus in the children's environment, but still, teaching is part of the learner environment. So we think it is worthwhile to ask directly, how do teachers teach reading? I tried 2 or 3 days ago a search at the web. In Spanish, to my surprise, the first thing I got was an old paper we wrote with Isabel Ríos about qué dicen los maestros que hacen para enseñar a leer y escribir. The other items describe methods for teaching reading. They give all kinds of advices about how to teach reading, but they don't explain or describe what teachers do in class. In English, more of the same. It's full of advices, materials, all kinds of ideas, projects, but the answer, how do teachers teach reading, remain unanswered. So our goal was to identify ways of teaching in preschool and first grade in Spain. About the second point, I will only make a short statement today, because our other goal was to look for the effect of ways of teaching on literacy gains. But this is the second part of the story. So, the first thing we had to do, and I must tell you that building the search for ways of teaching was in itself a very fruitful learning experience. The first thing we do was to look in previous research, what makes the difference? What are the factors, the behaviors, the strategies that make the difference between efficient teachers and not so efficient teachers? There is not so many, but there are previous work about good practices, about teachers' conceptions on literacy, about the effect of content knowledge on teaching. So we look at all this research, and unfortunately, we had in our teams people that had a lot of experience working with teachers. So they used this experience in order to try to define what we call relevant distinction. What are the main distinctions between all these teachers that work so differently in classrooms? So first of all, one of the main differences, on the one extreme, teachers that have a diversity of spaces and materials. Again, we are talking about kindergarten and first grade. So we have those teachers that have differentiated spaces in their classroom and a diversity of material. I will go on more details in a minute. And those that have a sort of uniform space and materials. So they work with almost one kind of material, they work with almost one kind of classroom organization. All the class is rather homogeneous in terms of organization of the class. I'm not talking about differences between children. The second relevant distinction relates to one kind of teachers that use from the very beginning, with 5 years old, what we call reading, strategic reading. So what do you think is written in this story? What kind of title would you put? They don't wait for the children to know or to have gained conventional reading and writing. They already work in spontaneous writing and anticipation of reading, even with very small children. And those teachers that work completely centered in basic skills in terms of code-related skill. I mean, letter-to-sound correspondences, phonological awareness, name of the letters, all what is considered in the field of literacy basic skills. So these are two extremes. Then we have, and this turned to be a very crucial differentiating factor, those teachers that take advantage of all kind of emergent situation in the class, in the classroom. They are magic users of occasional learning. If a certain bird flies in the class, they take this an advantage to learn about teaching about bird habits and about a different type of songs. On the other extreme, we have teachers that have rigid planning and they go with their code. So no matter if a bird or una paloma or whatever enters their classroom, they follow with what they have planned to do. So the fourth dimension of distinction is, on one extreme, all those have tolerance for mistakes and for errors, and those that are very much concerned about the formal aspect of writing and accuracy in reading. As I suppose you have already discovered, all these distinctions concern different domains. They are related to classroom organization, to planning, to activities and content, and to ways of evaluation. So the relevant differentiations are found in all these four domains. So the next step was to build instruments in order to gather information about how these different dimensions are present in the classrooms. So we developed a set of different instruments in order to discover the teaching practices. And I am going to talk especially today about the questionnaire, how do we use this questionnaire, and what kind of information we have got from this questionnaire. This is a self-reporting questionnaire of massive application, and it has, well, it is constructed using a Likert scale. I'm doubting whether to go into technical details, so maybe I will tell you, and then if something is not clear, I can explain more easily. As you can read, what we ask from the teachers is what they are doing with respect to very detailed question, not what they want to do or what they have done, what they are doing, not what they think, but what they are doing. In order to arrive to this formula, and in order to arrive to the set of questions I will share with you, of course we did all kind of piloting and discussion and whatever you like. Well, so, for example, I use printed materials such as newspaper, advertisement, recipes for teaching, reading, and writing. This is a statement. So, I never use all kind of printed material. Rarely, sometimes, often, frequently, always. So, 30 very specific and detailed questions about classroom organization, for example. I carry out the activities for reading and writing in small groups. Never, rarely, always. Well, the same 6 possible frequency. What we were trying to evaluate is frequency of preferences of a certain activity. Then, for planning, for example, I decide the vocabulary I teach taking into account the experiences children bring to class. So, never, always, sometimes. Or I have the content and activities for teaching literacy organized for the whole year. So, pay attention that even to reflect together on these questions already gives you a certain vision of the kind of details that are involved in literacy teaching. Is a long way from what is usually called a method for teaching literacy. So, for evaluation, for example, I display children's original written production even if they contain mistakes. So a teacher who was very much concerned about the written outcome will say that never he will put a written product with mistakes in a public, to put them on the wall. I correct the children when they are guessing instead of reading. So those teachers that are very much concerned with anticipation will not correct when they are guessing. Will take this as a possible approach to reading. But those that are very concerned with the conventional reading will fight against this type of behavior. For activities and content, I teach the spelling room that are adequate to the children's age. So for each one of these 4 domains, we developed different set of questions. This is called the theoretical structure of the questionnaire. This questionnaire was answered by 1,193 preschool teachers and 1,057 first grade teachers from all these different regions in Spain. So it is not, it is a relatively representative sample of the preschool and first grade teachers and in the various regions in Spain. Oof, no sé. You can think anything. Well, I'll tell you. It's not so important. On this page of the questionnaire, the teachers were asked to put their personal data, age, gender, the kind of school they are working, private, public, whatever, in a closed format, so only to mark the response. There was only one open question. What method do you use for teaching reading? This was on purpose the only open question. And the possibilities, for these possibilities, we use the traditional distinction, phonics, syllabic, global, mixed, others. So we left this open to see, and you will see again afterward, what did we find with this sort of question. So, oh, qué tragedia. Bueno, I'll try to explain looking at it. The first impossible to see graph showed the distribution of teachers by gender. So, as you can guess, the highest column are the second graph on the right is teaching experience. So most of the teachers that answered these questionnaires had more than 6 years of experience. So they were established teachers. The first on the down on the right is the age. So the highest column is between 41 and 50. So most of our kindergarten teachers and first grade teachers are women between 40 and 50 with a long experience in teaching. And the last one, the first column, is public schools. So most of the respondents of the questionnaire were working in public schools. Now look at the correspondence, look at the results of the only open question. What method do you use for teaching reading? 62% of the respondents say they use mixed methods. So this obliges you to go to the classroom, because what do they mean by mixed methods? Very few, well then, now, 16% of the teachers say they use global method, and 6% of the teachers declare themselves constructivist. So I don't know whether you are familiar with people from hello, now. Okay, so remember that constructivism was not among the options, but still we have 6%. If we know this a little bit history about literacy in this country, we must be a bit surprised about this finding. But yeah, this is a point for discussion among us afterwards. And 3% declared to use, 8% declared to use phonics, and a small amount to use other methods. So now we look, and I'm sorry, this is the most technical part of the questionnaire, but I must tell you a bit about how did we analyze the responses, because otherwise we will have just to believe to our findings. So as I told you before, we designed the questionnaire with a certain
Es la pila, seguro.
Now, okay. So, we had to do or to perform some different sort of analysis, statistical analysis, in order to see whether the empirical structure, which means the way that all these teachers answered to the question, correspond to what we have designed or what we have planned theoretically in the building of the questionnaire. So what we did is it's called a factor analysis, in order to see how the different questions we have used correlate with the initial differentiating dimension we have defined theoretically. Remember? So we got that effectively, or really, a number of questions correlate very high what we have called explicit instruction of the written code in activities that were programmed to this end. So there is a group of questions that relates very highly to this sort of factor, or to this sort of distinguished feature. Then we have another group of questions that relates very strongly, and you see, only to this different factor, or different distinguishing factor, that relates to autonomous writing or autonomous reading. This is a method in order to prove whether the empirical structure of the questionnaire is related to the theoretical building of the questionnaire. Now we have a different, rather small set of questions that relate to a third factor, focus on learning outcomes, A lot of questions were not related to any factor, so they go out. And then we have a different set of questions that was very much related or highly correlated with occasional learning and diversity of materials. Then we move to how the different responses cluster in relation to these distinguishing features. And we got 3 different groups of responses that correspond to 3 different profiles of practice. As I said before, if you want technical details of all these procedures, we have a paper on this, or other ways we can talk about with more details. But the 3 teaching profiles we got from this cluster analysis had the following shape. On the one hand, we have what we call instructional profile. These teachers, or teachers that were ascribed to this profile, use very frequently explicit instructions, which mean in all these questions, they answer very frequently all the group of questions that was related to this factor. So they very infrequently use autonomous writing or developed activities in class in order to develop autonomous writing. They were very frequently preoccupied or concerned for correctness, for getting the right outcome, and very infrequent use of occasional learning. You got the profile? A very known profile. Then we have, at the other extreme, what we call, we invented all this name, obviously, what we call situational teachers. Situational teachers are those with infrequent explicit instruction, frequent autonomous writing, infrequent concern for correctness, and frequent use of occasional learning. So as you can see, it's a sort of mirror image of instructional teachers. And in the middle, in between, we have, I don't know how do they manage, what we call multifunctional teachers, which are teachers that frequent explicit instruction, frequent autonomous writing, frequent concern for correctness, and frequent use for occasional learning. So let's see now, I'm sure we are not going to see anything, but the distribution of these 3 different profiles in the whole sample, which means taking together kindergarten and first grade teachers, you can see, even blurred, you can see that we have a very balanced distribution. We had 37% of situational teachers, 34% of instructional teachers, and 29% of multifunctional teachers. This is for the whole sample. Should I put here kindergarten separated from first grade, we will show a different picture, because all the situational teachers go home for first grade, and we get much more instructional teachers in first grade. But still, we have a balanced, or rather balanced representation of these 3 types of profiles in the different Spanish regions. Now, and so what? Well, I think it's a sort of attainment to have got some picture about what is going on. Now we can answer in more detail what are the differences between teachers, not just in terms of a label. He or she is she is working with a global method, or she is working in small groups, but we can give now much more details about the different activities that teachers say they do frequently. Although I am somehow highlighting or the fact that this is a self-reporting questionnaire, we already know that it's very much, it correlates very highly with different instruments we have used with the same teachers. So, as you probably remember, let's see if I can go. We have also used interviews and observation of classes, so there are high correlations between the results in the questionnaire and what we got, the picture we got from the different kind of instrument. But let's have a look. Can we see now something? This graph tries to show what is the relation between self-declared method and teaching profile. As you can see, the instructional teachers are mainly in the the method or what teachers declare as phonics. The the situational teachers are very much concentrated in what they define themselves as constructivism or global, but you can get also teachers from different profile in the different method or in the different self-declared method. So there is not at all a one-to-map mapping between a profile of practice and self-declared method. Another interesting point is the difference by geographic regions. We have some regions that are more situational than others. For example, León is a region or a community that present a higher percentage of instructional teachers. And we take this kind of information to see the relation between the curriculum in the community and the profile of practice. And indeed, we have found that, for example, in Andalusia, there is a strong correlation between the amount of situational teachers and the kind of advices on or guides they are getting from the official curriculum. So this can give you, or this can give people in further research a picture, a general picture of the kind of practices that are mostly used in one region as compared to the other, or in some cases in one school as compared to the other. So, as I said before, these results correlate highly with other instruments we have used to find out what is going on in the classes. So personal interviews confirm the adscription to a certain profile. Observation of classes confirm the adscription to a certain profile. So I think that it's an instrument that can be used in order to get information about teaching practices. But there is another kind of information we got from observing the classes that I would like to share with you. This second source of information, directly from observing classes, refers not so much to the teaching practices, but to the kind of communicative dynamic that is going on in the classroom. So what we did is to look for the verbal interactions that happen inside 39 classrooms. And we look with whom do children interact, which is very simple. We try to find out the verbal interchange between, or what pairs can we establish of verbal interchange. And this is what we find. Can you see something? There were three possibilities: whether the child is interacting with the teacher, whether the child is interacting with a pair, or whether the child is interacting with the observer, because we were inside the classes. So it's easy to guess that the longest column corresponds to interaction with the teachers. So if you have a look at the length of the column corresponding to interaction with the teachers and the length of the column interacting with a pair, you can feel immediately the difference. It's important, a point of clarification. We only look at verbal interaction that were directly related to the task. We don't look, that's why you can see doesn't interact, which means he doesn't speak, and we look for specifically number of children. And so all the verbal interaction we take into account were those that were directly related to the task we were observing. If he was asking for a rubber, or if he was planning what to do after class, this was not considered for us as a verbal interaction. So from all the verbal relevant interaction, children are communicating verbally, mainly with a teacher. In first grade, a bit more, but also in kindergarten. The second dimension we look at is how does information circulate? Do the children require information? Do they give information? Do they discuss information? And again, with the same criteria. So only relevant, task-related verbal interactions. So the longest column is children that work alone, which means they are very much centered in the task, but they don't interact. They are solving exercises or doing a specific task, but they don't discuss, nor ask, nor... And then the second most frequent is all kind of unrelated interaction. And the third one, the child is either asking or giving, mainly giving information, which means answering questions. If we take together these two dimensions, we have that the communicational pattern in class is answering questions to the teacher. And this was irrespective from all the different profiles of practice we were observing before. So in spite of the differences we have observed, the sort of dynamic, of communicational dynamic, is very similar in all the classes. Well, as I told you before, this is going to be the shortest part of the story, because in order to understand deeply all these findings, I would have to explain in much more detail how did we arrive to this conclusion. But basically, what we did is a follow-up study, a longitudinal study, taking children from kindergarten up to 3rd grade, and hopefully afterwards we will see. And then we did an initial evaluation of all these children in starting kindergarten. We have a full evaluation on all kinds of literacy-related abilities, including writing, word recognition, familiarity with text. So we have a picture of what we call initial level of literacy when they start kindergarten. And then we go back to the same children at the end of 1st grade. And again, at the beginning of 3rd grade. So, at the end of 1st grade, we test the basic, the minimal requirement for the end of 1st grade. If the children were able to spell words, isolated words, or short sentences, and whether they were able to identify written words, which are the minimal, basic requirement. I need you to remember that we do have very different teaching profiles. And those differences were remarkable not only in the description of the profiles, but in visiting the classes, in observing the activities. We were observing very different kind of teachers in every possible way of different. Teachers that can use 40 minutes in order to learn about one letter, and teachers that use 40 minutes to discuss life and death. This is the sort of difference at the same age. And we had documented example, and you can read. So the differences are huge. When it comes to evaluate literacy gains as they were defined, no significant effect of teaching practices. In what not significant effect? In spelling of isolated words and in identification of isolated words. We must remember here that Spanish and Euskera and Catalan are relatively transparent orthographies. So our children do not have problems of decoding. They manage to decode in a few months. When I comment this with my American colleagues, they cannot understand. So what kind of problem do you have? It takes us 4 years in order to get what your Spanish students get in a few months. So for decoding, it doesn't matter what kind of teacher do you have, really. We have the same percentage of problematic children, children that did not attain the minimal level, exactly in the three times that we have evaluate performance. So this is not the point. But still, you know, when you build all this research in order to show that teaching makes a difference, and then you find that you don't have a difference, it's a not so comfortable situation. What happens next when we go for testing reading comprehension at the beginning of 3rd grade? So what happened? Significant effect on reading comprehension, specifically on comprehension of expository text, which means having a situational teacher or multidimensional teacher in order to understand a narrative which is part of normal development of language, which is the most common used text from very early on, doesn't make a big difference. But when it comes to those texts that are mainly used at school and require word knowledge more than narrative, because they are devoted to develop a topic, a theme, not an organization of events. So for understanding expository text, it does make a difference if you had in 1st grade and in kindergarten a situational or a multidimensional teachers. So those children that had in 1st and kindergarten situational multidimensional teachers were better at reading comprehension specifically for expository text. But there is always a but in this. In all this finding, both in initial learning of literacy and in reading comprehension, and we are now working on written composition, and I think we are going to get very similar results. In all this, there is always a mediating effect of parents' level of education. A mediating effect does not mean a determinant effect, but a mediating effect and of children's initial level of literacy, which means that children that had initial good level of literacy when starting preschool, even if they have parents with lower level of literacy, somehow they attain better results. But children that had a low level of literacy when starting kindergarten and their parents had low level of education attain worse results. So for all these cases, we have always the mediating factor of parents' education, which is not new. I think that we just confirm what is already known from a lot of other studies. But what I think it is different is to understand the interaction between parents' level of education and children's level of literacy. This kind of interaction, I think that gives you some idea of the kind of work that school, or the kind of importance of school in trying to get higher level of initial literacy. So, I think that we are coming to the end. And I hope that we have got now a more comprehensive picture of teaching practices, and we can point at some details about how do teachers work in the classrooms. I think that this kind of approach and instruments are and will be useful for further research, because in spite of its complexity, the teaching factor should be included when analyzing predictor of successful literacy. We can relate this in research term only in the subject-related variables. I think that reflecting on these distinctive features between teachers is useful for teachers training, and members of our research team are using this instrument in order to raise awareness about the multiple details that are involved in initial literacy learning. And the fourth point, thinking about all the fever of evaluation we have now, is how complex, how difficult is to measure learning gains. Because even in such well-defined domains as spelling or word identification, we see all the time the intervention and the interaction of multiple factors that are acting together simultaneously in order to explain a certain learning gain. And that's it. So, muchas gracias. ¿Puedo? Y ahora todas las preguntas.
And now, if you have any questions, thank you very much, Liliana. Perhaps we have time for some questions. I don't know if someone wants to ask any questions.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. It's been terrific. Thank you very much. Just a little bit of a technical question. How do you control that the teachers, the learners were having throughout 3-4 years, they always belong to the same profile?
Well, for the first evaluation, it was not a problem.
No problem.
Because kindergarten, and then for the second, the same children. So we had children that had the same profile throughout the 3 years, because kindergarten.
Was it the same teacher?
No, they changed teacher. So we have, but we have all kind of different patterns. We have children that have the same teacher, the same profile, children that have a certain profile in kindergarten and different profiles. So what we did all the time is to compare and to trace for the profiles. We do have what we call the self-identification of each teacher. So after filling the massive questionnaire, they had to, ¿cómo se dice? Auto-identificarse. Whether they see themselves, they recognize themselves as it was pictured in the questionnaire. So we use this as a control. But there are all kind of combinations. So we know what happens at first grade with certain type of profile and at kindergarten with certain type of profile.
Could you pass the reference, please,
yes,
for the article you promised? Thank you.
No, esto no, tanto trabajo para que no haya preguntas.
Much work and there are no questions.
Bueno, voy a hacerla en español. If you don't mind.
I'm going to ask you in Spanish. I think, first of all, I would like to thank you because it was very interesting. I'm not a primary education teacher, but I love looking at these topics. According to what I have understood, there is no precise conclusion about what's the best profile for a teacher. Because you say that family has weights a lot, has a huge influence, but it seems that if they are multifunctional or situational, it seems to be a better profile for a teacher. Am I right? In order to teach reading. And so the training of teachers, should it go in that direction? Because it's going to improve the results of the students. Am I correct in that assumption?
Well, the question about the best profile is depend for what. O sea, el mejor perfil para qué?
Profile for what?
For initial learning of literacy in Spanish, Catalan, or Euskera, it's not so important. Being an instructional teacher or a situational teacher, but it seems that if you are a situational teacher or a multidimensional teacher, you are providing your students with the knowledge base that is necessary in order to handle what's called the typical school genre. Expository text is the typical school genre. I need to tell something about this point, because when we measure reading comprehension, we use narrative and expository as two prototypes of very constructing types of text. So I was looking for a good example of expository text for young children. Second grade, third grade. To my surprise, there are almost no expository text for small children. Everything is narrated, you can say. Everything is turned into a story. Well, although we had some constraint because we were looking for similar text in 3 different languages. But I was really very surprised. I don't know whether you are aware that until very late in school, children, most of the text, even in what I call conocimiento del medio, o sea, all this, they are exposed mainly to narrative text. So when it comes to expository text, which requires different strategies for reading, they are not prepared at all. So all these children that got somehow experience about world knowledge when they were small manage better with school text. So here we have sort of a double mission. On one hand, we should somehow start to get expository text even for very small children. We have the human body is learned as a story. I understand the reason for that decision, but we know from language development that narrative are natural part of language development because they are organized chronologically, because all kind of reasons. But expository, no. They have to learn how to read an expository text. So this can be, again, an interaction between the profile and the task. For expository text, you better got a situational teacher. Did I answer the question? Okay.
Yes, thank you very, very much. Very interesting, very dynamic talk. Thank you very much. And we haven't noticed that the time has flown because you have been so, you've caught our attention so well. So I thought that what you'd said, I'm afraid we're going to have to stop because it's time to sort of move outside. But what you have said is a brilliant lead-in to tomorrow too, I think, because we were all nodding our heads about narrative and exposition and the text types of school, which is a large part of all the studies, as you know, of our Australian friends and what we've been doing too in the course. So thank you very, very much. Really super interesting. So thank you. We've had a very good afternoon. Thank you.
I think Rachel mentioned tapas, wine, something like that, in the patio.
Yes, so everything